Welcome back to this last part of today's program, The Real Transformers, where we are talking to those who are changing the industry. Are they risk takers or do they just have a brilliant visionary mindset? This is your session again, Craig, so I'll leave the studio to you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much, Matt. And yes, this is going to be an interesting session because I really want to get under the skin and really understand some of the thinking behind our guests, because we've got a lot of journey ahead of us in our transformation. But let's not forget, we didn't start this transformation today. We started talking about the transformation a while ago. And that's involved a lot of evolution, both in our mindsets as individuals, and then in our corporate mindsets, and now across the industry as well. So it is a great pleasure that I actually have Jan-Ivan Wang from Wilhelmsen and Norsey in the studio to join me. We've got Mark Cameron from Ardmore Shipping to join me from Ireland, and Tekla Bordevez to join me from the Netherlands. Tekla is a 6th or 7th generation shipbuilder. I can't remember. I had a chat with her recently, and the stories about her shipbuilding family go back decades and centuries, don't they, Tekla? So I'm going to start with you, if I may, because the two things I really want to get to understand here is you are, to an extent, a servant of the shipping industry. You build what they want, you give them what they need. How have you seen the transformation of what's being asked of you? And can I dare just pick at this a little bit more as well, because I know you're quite an outspoken person. How do you see your own personal transformation around this journey, this transformation? Where would you say it all started for you? At what point did you suddenly think, okay, I can't just be casual about this whole decarbonisation or environmental discussion? At what point did you think, actually, this is part of what I need to be?
Yes, I think it's also, it started, I think, already with the needs that we need to make the difference between all the countries in China and the low to give a benefit of your vessel, but also the benefit of for the ship owners. And that's why we always think about innovations. How can we do an innovation and then also give it as a kind of a present and a future-proof present to our ship owners? And I think if you need, then we saw already 10 years ago that we needed to change the energy generation. And that's why we started already. The first vessel we delivered was in 2009 with hydrogen and a fuel cell. And it was a big disaster because the infrastructure was not ready for it. So, hey, we can also tell that kind of stories. But we always knew that it would happen once or the other day. And what we like is to make the kind of innovation or renewals that we say, okay, it's a proven past, but it's also a future focus. So what you need to do, what we think you need to do, is that you create a kind of electric system with a future-proof fuel system. And that can be different things. So we create in all the vessels we do now at this moment, a power management system, electric power management systems. And then we still use the diesel generators, but we also do the experience with batteries. We do the experience with LNG, and we also do the experience with hydrogen. And that's something. Yeah, it's also something that's in me, because it's not only the focus on environmental issues, but it's also the focus on future for your clients and also the competition from low salary countries. We need to make the difference if we want to build ships here in the Netherlands.
Yeah, I can see that. And as I've spoken to a lot of different companies, and particularly leaders within companies within the maritime sector, I see a growing appetite for change and acceptance of change. And they kind of hark back to, and quite often I heard this is a very pertinent comment that came my way a few years ago when we were talking about decarbonisation, and I was in it was during the climate talks that were taking place in Copenhagen a number of years ago, and I met a ship owner there, or a representative from a Norwegian ship owner, and I went, "Oh, I didn't know you'd be here." And his comment was, "Well, yes, I've always been here. The hippies have taken over the boardrooms now."
Yeah.
That for me, that was a pertinent thing. He basically said, "Yeah, we just cut our hair off and just got serious." That was the 60s generation that have become the leaders of today. And now we've got a new generation that are coming in. So let me ask that question, turn around there. If I could go to Jan Ivan Wang in the studio. How have you seen the evolution yourself in terms of how you've taken on board this transition that you have needed? And how have you then thought about and gone around turning that into something that will fuel the people who work within your organization, in this case, in Wilhelmsen or Norsey?
Hi, Craig. It's good to be here, and I'm sorry that you all can't be in this room here. We're a little lonely, but we're doing fine. I think from a personal journey point of view, I think what's happening around us in society is something which you read about, you hear about, you discuss, and you have no choice but to react. It's part of a personal evolution. And being a curious guy, I think the journey we're embarking on is extremely interesting from a personal perspective, but also from a company's perspective. I think from a Wilhelmsen's point of view, we decided to establish what we call the new energy division. And that's involved in everything from hydrogen value chain, from production to using it on shipping side to the wind segments. And as such, this is not a journey we started now this week. It started several years ago. But this transition is accelerating. And for us, it's important to be able to do two things. We need to get on board very, very good people which have the modern skills we need to make this transition possible. At the same time, we need to make sure that what we already have, and which we'll have for a long, long time, because this transition will take years to come. The cash flow and the ongoing business we are running today needs to be there for decades to come. That also needs to change and become more and more productive, more and more green, but that's basically a lot of what we do with our cash flow. So you need to do both these things at the same time, and as a leader, how do you ensure that you motivate the transition you need to go through, work with new companies, new technologies, like Tekla talked about. At the same time, you need to ensure that what has brought you to where you are, the cash flow, the great people, the great products, and the great services, which also needs to be there in the next 10 years, how do you make sure they are equally motivated and become part of the journey? And that's, I think, a leadership challenge which I thoroughly enjoy because it gives me energy, and hopefully it'll give some of the people working for us energy as well.
How do you go about that? How do you actually encourage? There's parts of all businesses that may be focused on the more traditional aspects of it or still focused within the oil and gas sector. So how do you do that? How do you inspire those individuals who may go home and meet family and they just go, "Oh no, you don't want to work in that sector anymore. You really want to go and work in this dynamic new hydrogen economy."
Yeah, and work for all the companies which presented early on today, which are very many of them are standalone companies with a new technology, and they will help us to bring us to where we need to go. I think the most important thing, and I think the Chinese kind of have a saying, it's tell me, show me, involve me. You can no longer, as a leader, just tell someone to do something. You can no longer just show them, you need to involve them. They need to understand, because they are going through the same personal journey as I am, about being able to be part of something new and better for society. And I think if you involve them in the transition, involve them and make sure they understand that their role is very, very relevant. I think if you do that, then you're halfway along the road. And then you need to bring in very, very good people at very many different layers of the organization to make sure that people can grow from a personal experience. This is not about just personal education. This is about collaboration. And that is a very, very different mindset. It requires a lot more openness. It requires trust. And it requires us to be a sense of belonging to the company, to the transition we're going through. Not just within Wilhelmsen, equally between me and Tekla, or me and Mark, or me and some of the other companies. Because I don't have all the answers. And that's a very important ingredient. You don't have all the answers anymore.
So does that mean that we should forget the past as we're moving forward, or do we need to remember where we've come from here a little bit?
Not only a little bit. I think, as Tekla said, how many generations are you, Tekla? 4 or 5 or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're also a family-owned company, and I think that makes us go through these type of transitions much better and with more resilience, I think. So having a strong foundation from a family point of view, having gone through similar transitions, don't forget that we went from wind and sail over to steamship 100 years ago. We left containers a few decades ago. So we've been through many different transitions, and I think having a core set of company values is a very important ingredient for making things happen.
Let me bring in Mark Cameron here, because Ardmore is based in Ireland. It's a tanker company, and this of course is a very pertinent discussion here for a tanker operator. But you're on board this transition as well. And Mark, you and I have met and talked at a number of conferences that I've organised over the years that have been looking at a lot of clean solutions and energy solutions, etc. Ardmore has recently invested in a technology company. I'm going to come to that in a second. But first of all, I want to get your response to what I asked Jan Iving just then, in terms of motivating people who still work in what could be seen by some people as yesterday's industry. So how do you motivate people to work in a tanker company when everybody's talking about a clean energy future?
And at that point, I seem to be frozen.
I think you're not frozen. He's frozen.
We can hear
Okay,
you.
so, okay,
We can still hear you, Mark.
I'm going to paraphrase what I think you were asking me. And I think it's such a great conversation, and it's interesting to hear the different perspectives that are put across. But I'm going to answer your question with my own journey. And Graham Westgarth, who was my old boss when I was working at TK in Vancouver, Graham, who's now the chairman of V-Ships, he, in a performance review, he said to me, Mark, what is your legacy? What are you leaving behind? And I sort of looked at Graham and I said to him, well, Graham, you're about 10, 12 years older than me. Isn't this a question you should perhaps be asking yourself internally rather than asking me, who's essentially your junior? But it was one of the best questions that anyone has ever asked me. And I would encourage everyone to do it when you're doing performance reviews with your staff and ask them, what are they contributing and what are they leaving behind? And it's interesting, today I read an article in one of the main trade press about seafarers being compared to, sort of the lowest common denominator as the world has moved to cheaper and cheaper crews. But I think that at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge that to some extent we have dumbed down the profession of seafaring. And I think that's something that we're going to regret, because the technology that we're talking about incorporating is going to be different, certainly. Maybe the complexities alone will have a different thinking process behind them. But in the future, things won't be going round and round and up and down in the way that they do today. Things are going to go quieter, silenter. You're not going to hear as much noise as you used to in the past. And that means that the sensory aspect of what seafarers are going to need is going to be a different kind of thought process to understand how ships are being operated. So I think the whole question about how do you motivate people into a future career has to sort of start with both ends of the spectrum. It has to start with the school leavers, and it has to start with the older generation. And we have to be prepared to reach out and bridge some of those differences that do exist. It's interesting that with ESG initiatives today, you are encouraged and rewarded to have gender diversity on board your fleet. But certainly when I was working with Maersk many years ago, gender diversity was sort of, well, why aren't you doing it? This was 20 years ago. So here we are today now getting rewarded by way of our banks and our investors for doing something that some companies have been doing for so long, yet we still haven't learned. So I think, patience is a virtue, but I think it's also appropriate sometimes to run out of patience with some of these long-standing excuses and just say that things have to change. They have to change faster, and they have to change because of us, not despite us.
So taking that one step further then, Mark, do you think that there are a lot of companies that are going to change almost as a knee-jerk reaction rather than changing in a more thoughtful way that's going to be more productive for society?
I think you could almost say that that's a given. You're going to have different degrees of willingness to embrace change in our own offices, let's be honest. I mean, every individual reacts to change in different ways. Some embrace it, some don't like it. Companies are no different, because I feel strongly that every company has a soul as long as you've still got people working in them. But the context or the tone that the leadership team set very much determines the type of person you're going to employ. And I do think that you need to look very carefully at the messages that you're sending out. And the worst message anyone can send out now is about greenwashing and doing something for reasons of public acceptance rather than true legacy that I was referring to earlier.
So that's really a case of actually having a deep understanding of the transformation and having a deep reasoning internally about what's going to be happening, rather than just getting in with a flow. I know that there's this big sort of greenwashing campaign in Norway through Skift to actually sort of address this, to make sure that there isn't any sort of flippant statements that are coming out. But let me take that the other side, though. For Tekla, I just wanted to bring you with this as a representative of the shipping industry. And I don't mean to suggest that this is actually yourself, but about 8 or 10 years ago, we started to see eco ships being talked about, and every shipyard was developing an eco ship. It became the phrase as the fuel prices went up. So the word eco and then super eco, mega eco ships were being developed and sold by shipyards. Do you think the shipbuilding industry is a lot more mature now and is at a lot more collaborative stage with the shipping companies as it works towards the goals that we've got to achieve?
Yes, what I see here in the Netherlands, and I think also in Europe, is that a lot of companies are working together, and we are really thinking, it starts with an electric propulsion system, but then we say, okay, what's the focus on the power? Is it the power requested by the RPMs of the generator, or is it the power requested by the propeller? So there you can already see that it's not only just the name ecosystem. You really need to show that you can save 10 or 50% of the fuel for the same vessel with the same capacity. So what we see here, multi-purpose vessels of 7,000 ton, they also want not an ecosystem, because I think that's more branding, more the positioning, but it's they really force us to think about less fuel, less pollution. And what you see here in the Netherlands is that all the complete shipbuilding industry, but not only shipbuilding, but also the delta industry, so the dredging companies, everybody, we are really looking what can we do, not only for environmental purpose, but also how can we earn money? How can we be the best of class and sell it for export reasons? And so there is always not only the research, the theoretical research, but what we always say is it's knowledge, skill, but it's also cash. And what you see at this moment is that there are a lot of focus on programs as hatches or twin decks of lighter materials. So it's not only fuel and emissions, but it's also to create a lightweight vessel to take the same capacity of goods with less fuel and less weight of the vessel. So it's not only electric propulsion, fuel systems. It's something that you say, what we want to give to the ship owner is that he can make a decision now for a future-proof system. And then in the future, he can change one of the diesel engines, of the gensets for battery systems or for LNG or for methanol or for ethanol, because we don't know what's going to be. Because even if we know ourselves what it will be, then infrastructural matters are so important on this part, and also costs of the fuel. So, and here in the Netherlands, we know, and also our government knows, that the maritime industry is big in the Netherlands. It's a huge industry, and it's also we always say we want to be the we still want to rule the world with our maritime industry, and it's very dangerous to say it when I talk to Scandinavian companies, to be honest. But we're very good.
Tekla, you're amongst good friends here.
Okay, thank you. No, but I think it's also we always say keep it smart and simple. Not stupid and simple, but smart and simple. So not innovation. Of course, it's something, we can't change the world from tomorrow on. This will take 10 years or 15 years. And we still need oil. We all know. So I think it's the only what we can do and what we can show the world, not only the Netherlands but here in Europe, is that if we want to do something for the environmental part, then shipping can do a big part, because we have an industry where if we build a vessel, everybody will sail with it for 25, 30 years. And in inland vessel, 100 years if you had it, and then still with old engines. So what we do is we look to the automotive industry. And if you see how the innovations they do on trucks or on cars, you can use it for your ideas, and you can use it on your vessels. So I really promote to use systems, already existing systems. So then maybe it looks like a super innovative system for the maritime industry, but it's not always that's not always the point. When we did the first fuel cell vessel in 2009, it was a disaster, but I still believed in fuel cell system, or in hydrogen. I still believed in hydrogen. So I bought a hydrogen engine in 2016, and we did it again, but then with a combustion engine, and just to try and to know how classification would work, how it will be, what also how much hydrogen we need, if it was really what they told us. So, and we did it on a really small scale, but we did it, and then we still started with our own power management system, so an electric propulsion system, and then we extend the system. And that's what we are very transparent in it. So we really want to share it also with the ship owners, but not only with ship owners, also with the rest of the maritime world. All the shipyards in the Netherlands, everybody knows each other. So if there is something, we share it. At this moment, I think that's really good. We have a maritime master plan. And that maritime master plan, there we want to create 30 vessels in 2030 without emission. And the government, they like it. So then we do 10 governmental vessels, 10 for my ship owners, not only mine, but the normal ship owners. And so we make, and 10 retrofits. So I think it's important to think like that, because we can't do it alone. We need to do it together. So we need ship owners who say, okay, I believe it. There must be, that's what I always say, there must be a benefit in it for all of us. So not only not only for environmental purposes, of course, also for environmental purposes, but also for the ship owner and also for the shipyard. That's the only, I think it's the only way to survive here in Europe with the maritime industry. Because if we do everything outside Europe, I always say without production, we don't have innovation. So we need also the production to do the innovation, because most of the innovations are created by the people here on the floor, not by me, but by the people on the floor.
Does that mean also, Tekla, that you're at the point now where you would say, no, we don't do that anymore? That was us 5-10 years ago. We don't do that now.
Yes, yes, yes. That's yeah. What we don't do is that at this moment we only do one innovation per vessel, because with our first in 2009 our fuel cell Nemo H2 was not only a small canal boat. It looked like a TGV train, and the guy sailing on it, he was still used to a steering wheel, and now this looked like an airplane and without noise. So he was so nervous about it. So I always say, just do one thing at a time, and then it will succeed. And you can focus on only that innovation and make it a success. Yeah.
Let me just go over to Mark Cameron briefly, because Mark, recently Ardmore invested or has taken a stake in a technology company. Rather than getting involved in a project, Ardmore has actually taken a stake with E1 Corporation, with an formed E1 Marine, where you are basically developing a methanol transformer to transform methanol into hydrogen that would go into a fuel cell on a vessel. The understanding, I think, is that you expect to see fuel cells put onto some deep sea vessels, probably your own or other vessels anyway, and they would replace the alternative generators or engines on ships, not the main engines per se. Tell me a little bit about why you felt that was an important move. Not so much the technology itself, but actually taking a stake in a technology business rather than a shipping business.
Yeah, well, I think it's actually not that uncommon, really, when you think about it. At the end of the day, we have an energy transition plan, and I think most of the responsible owners out there will have some type of plan put in place or be working on a plan to understand the energy transition and also how it's going to affect your markets. And as you rightly pointed out, we are a tanker company, but a tanker doesn't just mean that you're moving petroleum products. It can also mean that you're moving, anything liquid in bulk. So our energy transition plan set about looking at technology, which, let's be honest, we get bombarded with updates and news, every day on new things that are coming out. But sometimes it's a little hard to understand, what's the hype from the reality. I also have deep concerns around the safety aspect of a lot of the technology that's being talked about, and whether it's ammonia or compressed hydrogen, or even methanol for that matter, each of them have a certain complexity attached to them that has a safety aspect. So we felt that it was important that we do our own research, that we go out there and look at what technology there is. And if we can find something that's really interesting, we got to be, and maybe we can't install it on our vessels straight away because we don't have type approval in that, but we have to be prepared to invest in this technology to get it to market. Because one of the things I think, and this isn't it might come across as a criticism, but it's not meant in that way. I think a lot of technology companies have some difficulty selling to the shipping industry, and there's a couple of reasons for that. And with all due respect to Tekla, a lot of shipyards, it's very difficult to get on the makers list, certainly in the yards that we build out in Asia. If you want to vary from the standard that's provided, certainly with all the major yards, you've got your work cut out to go and say, well, I would like to try to innovate with this and that product. So for technology suppliers trying to break into the shipping market, it's very difficult. We are a relatively closed bunch. We are still, somewhat conservative in our approach, and we have expensive assets that last a reasonably long period of time in a very unforgiving environment. So we honestly felt that to make a difference, we had to be able to put our money where our mouth is, invest in technology, understand the safety aspects, work with the class society to bring it through type approval, and ultimately get it into shipyards and get it out to owners, where hopefully we can now talk as like-minded, as a like-minded company, as opposed to just a service provider of another technology.
Good. And if I go to the studio now, Jan Iving, and sat beside you, of course, is Pia Melling. I didn't introduce her at the start. I didn't get a chance, but hi, Pia.
Hi.
Good to see you again. I thought I'd let us steal all the limelight, given how much of the limelight you got yesterday. Anyway, we asked you just to come into the studio just to help us with a little bit of the Q&A if we got any questions from the audience there in the studio or on the chat. I don't think we've got any on the chat yet, have we? Have we got any questions from the audience?
Not here now on the chat. I have a few questions though.
You fire away, Pierre. You're now as professional as me.
No, not really. So first one is to Tekla. Nice to meet you, by the way. The business model for the yard, do you see that as changing? Potential revenue models in the future, etc. So instead of just selling a one-off, do you consider more subscription on a future-proof vessel that can come in for upgrades? Have you any thoughts about how your role can change in this environment?
Yes, what we see, and that's why we like to work also with our government for their vessels, is that what you see is that they go for the system. In the end, what we say, we sell an electric propulsed vessel, and what kind of vessel it is, it doesn't matter. If it's a tanker, it's easier. If it's a dredger, as we have at this moment over here, a lot of dredgers, then it's easy because you can say, okay, you can use your energy, your propulsion energy also for your dredging equipment, or your propulsion also for loading and unloading a tanker. So then it's easy to also to say, okay, we have less power installed. That's easy. But also for multipurpose vessels, you can do a lot, and you can save 10 or 15% of the fuel for them. And I think now at this moment, with also the here in Netherlands, all the ship owners are a little bit afraid about the CO2 tax. I don't know if they already speak in Norway about that, but here all ship owners have particular help. What are we doing? Because we have now the CO2 tax. And now everybody really wants a simple system prepared for all fuels. And I think if you can do it that way, then you can really help each other. So we are now, what's the vessel and how's the vessel look like? Everybody knows that we can build the vessels. It's more what's the maintenance of the vessel, and what can we earn with it? And so OPEX, CAPEX is very important. So that is ship owners at this moment, if we talk with them, there are three things: CAPEX, OPEX, and finance. And I think that's what's changing. And not the ship owner who say, okay, I have a great idea and I want a vessel and it must really be mine, but I have my idea. Now we do it together. We have proven systems. And if you like the proven systems and you're ready for the future, then you can come to us. So that's how we act at this moment as a group. And it works really well, to be honest. And so it's not, if it's a multipurpose vessel or it's a dredger or if it's a governmental vessel, in the end, the heart of the vessel is the same. So the power management system and the electric propulsion is the same. And we do it completely redundant. So that's also easier for classification societies. And I agree with Mark told us is that it is. I'm also a little bit hesitating with companies who don't have the experience with gases, to work with gases or to work with methanol, to work with ethanol, because it is really different than if we only work with multipurpose, with dry cargo vessels. So what we try to do is our first experiences was already with LPG vessels, with gas vessels, because then the crew is already prepared for how to work with it. But that's something we really need to focus on. We have we need to focus on what's the infrastructure for the fuel systems, and how dangerous is it for crew, and what kind of skills we need for the crew. And it's what we do is very nice, the complete electric propulsion, because it's also for the ship owner that he can look at home what they are doing. That's also easy if you have all the information, and we need it. And I think it's we don't have a way back. We are going that direction, but we really need to think how we can help each other to keep also all these systems safe.
You had a comment, Eivind?
Just a comment, going back to Tekla, what you said on CO2 taxation. I think there is still some challenges when it comes to OPEX of the new fuels. I think we as ship owners, we make decisions and we want return on equity. And I think there is a need to discuss whether you can take some of those CO2 taxation or some other taxation form over a time period to subsidize and levelize the cost of energy as we go through the transition we need to have. So I think that's an important discussion for politicians in various countries to have, because short sea is where it really will start, and then it'll be deep sea, or then deeper and deeper sea. But I want to go back to Mark and your development dialogue, where you saw the light, so to speak. And going back to the people side, one thing which we have worked with for decades in Wilhelmsen is for people to really get a sense of who they are. You know, we spend an awful lot of energy and time getting to know who you are and how you influence others. So your self-awareness, and this goes back to your opening question about the journey you are embarking on. And I think companies have to decide, do they view themselves and the culture they build up? Do they see that they are part of a complex world which they have to deal with? That's one area. Then you become very internally focused and trying to make the best out of it. Or do you kind of say, look, we are now part of a world which is changing, and we need to adapt. Then you start looking externally at what you need to do to be part of this new environment. The last part, and this is where I think we want to strive towards as companies, is that we see the world is changing around us and we want to care for it. And if you look upon the younger generation today, they want to work for companies who have the thoughts and mindset along the ladder. They don't want to work for someone who just continues to do and adapts based on what's happening around them. They want to understand the forces which are impacting us, and given the requirements the world needs to go through, how can we make this actually happen within the company? And that's when you get the energy. And I don't care if you are 50 or 60 or 20. That's basically what we're seeing in society, and that's where the companies really need to get their act together. Because either you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And for this really to make change, you need to be viewing this as part of the solution. And Tekla, you run this, and I had a question for you from the audience. You've had dealings with multiple interest groups, governments, customers, machine manufacturers, you name it. And if you go back and compare, how have these discussions changed the last 5 or 6 years? Do you see that those discussions and the discussion points and the type of interest groups are influencing you in a different way now than they did 5 or 6 years ago?
Yes, completely. 5, 6 years ago or 10 years ago, we did it because we wanted to do it. We wanted to do something else than only shipbuilding. And now what you see is everybody's very motivated. But exactly what you say is that it is our human capital. We really need to take care of our human capital, and also the export value for our government is very important. And if you see what we do with the maritime industry, that we work together, that our dredging companies are not only dredging companies, but they are now more wind farm creators. So the transition of the complete maritime industry in where we can show that we can really do the difference. That's also what is interesting for not only young people, but also for what I can tell you is we have here in the Netherlands the very big yachting industry. We have really the shipyards are only yachting. And what you see is for them, it's even sometimes more difficult to get good people than for shipyards who do commercial vessels, but then with a real mindset of making the world better and make a good system for everybody. So not only making the world better and not only CO2, but also the innovation, had really the force to do the innovation. And then they say, for us, it's easier to work for a commercial shipyard who really wants to do it than for the richest in the world, and they are not really interested in it. They're only interested in to have a nice iPad on their vessel and that it looks very nice. So you can see that there is another mindset in young people, and it's also in the education they have.
I have a question for Mark as well.
We're going to run out. We're going to run out of time very shortly. But shoot, go on.
My question is, what I want Mark to do, and I will do the same. If we found a better mousetrap, we have a responsibility to reach out and share that mousetrap. If it's methanol, LOHC, you name it, because we are in this together. And whatever smart ideas he has, he should share with me, and vice versa, or share with the industry. That's the only way we will be able to get to where we need to be within a very short time period.
Yeah. Quick follow-up, and also share your failures, because you just did that, Tekla. You told us something that failed, and it was a disaster. And you rarely hear top managers talking about that. So I think it's a really good insight. If stuff that you try out that doesn't work, it's also good information. Not wait for the ultimate mousetrap, but the steps towards that, and what can you actually stop looking at, and share that information.
Yes, and I think also we have now here diesel electric dredger, and we want to add on hydrogen. And then the big discussion is here, we need 1.6 megawatt. But it's you can also say, we want to learn from it. Maybe start with 100 kilowatt, and then we can really look if it works and how it works. Because all of us know that at this moment, the fuel you need to take with you to really sail with a hydrogen vessel, it's too much, because there are no systems that you can say compressed or liquid or other systems. It is too much. If you have a 5,000 tons vessel, then you need a 6 or 7 to also carry the hydrogen. So at this moment, I think it's not the innovation is not the fuel cell or the combustion engine. That already exists for a long time, and maybe it can be better, or the production can be higher. But it's really, and Mark, I think you can agree on it. It's really, what are we going to use as a fuel, and how are we going to take it with us? So I think.
Let me go there. We've only got about a minute left, 2 minutes left maximum there. So Tekla, can I just put the last words then to Mark first, and then to Jan Iving. Mark, there's been a lot of comments said there. You've sat there very quietly through a lot of them, and one of them was directed directly at you in terms of a mousetrap and perhaps even failings as you tried to look at the mousetraps.
Yeah, look, the time for wait and see has passed, and we're now at the do and act. I think that the R&D fund that is being proposed through the IMO is a very, very elegant solution. It ties in with a levy system, and it's going to help generate and stimulate technology in ways that we've never seen before. I think that the core is people, like Jan Arvin was saying. It needs shipping needs people. There's no way about it, but it needs problem solvers, not problem moaners.
Yep.
So my last point: the time for wait and see is done. It is now do and act.
Good. Thanks, Mark. And Jan Arvin, last words from you, please, before we close.
No, I can echo what Mark said. I think we're beyond the point of no return. I think we're going to make this world a better place, and we're going to be part of the solution. So I look forward to that. I look forward to meeting Tekla and Mark in person.
Well, I hope so. And thank you very much to Pierre in the studio there. And as you just said, hopefully in January 2022, it won't be the same weather as you've got in Oslo today, but at least we can all meet, hopefully, in Oslo for North Shipping January 2022. Thank you very much to Tekla in the Netherlands. Thank you very much to Mark in Ireland. Thank you, Jan Arvin Vang, and to Pierre Melling there in the studio in Lillestrøm. Mads Holder, are you there?
I'm here, and thank you to Craig. That concludes our program for today. So just a quick roundup. Craig, you said in the beginning of this session that you had some expectations, or in the beginning of this day. What do you think now after hearing everything that's been said?
Well, I think we got to it very right at the end there. The time for talking is over and the time for action is now. But there's still a lot of questions about what action has to be taken, and there needs to be a lot of thought by a lot of companies. We heard in the session previously, on the finance session, some of the companies don't know quite what action's going to take. They don't know what fuel. There may be a range of fuels. There's questions that they still have to answer, perhaps with themselves, or perhaps collaboratively as they get into partnerships. I think what we were hearing from Jan Arvin Vang is the need to look outside of your organisation to find partnerships and collaborations, something that Wilhelmsen has done, something that we see that Ardmore has done, and something that we see a lot of the other companies that we heard today have started to do. And that gives them the confidence and the courage to actually start making that journey, because they're doing it hand in hand with other businesses, other experts in different sectors that can help them understand the journey that they have to go through. So yes, I think we saw a lot of discussion about the road we have to go down, but seeing that we have to do it a lot more collaboratively than we thought.
And in January, as you said, we are meeting again for, or at least some of us, for the North Shipping Conference, the big one, hopefully live. And what do you think we will be talking about then, taking into account what we heard today?
Well, I think on the hydrogen side of things, we're going to hear about a lot more projects that have actually started to evolve and have actually started to produce results. There'll be test vessels that are in the water. There'll be projects that are actually putting together the infrastructure, both for the ammonia and the hydrogen. I know of a lot of feasibility studies or paperwork studies and research that's going into how it all can be connected together. So I think very quickly we're going to see that the industry is going to evolve. And that's a really good sign. Given what we've got to achieve by 2030, when we look at the amount of carbon CO2 emissions that we've got to cut from the shipping industry, we look at what we got to do, it's a very good sign. So I think 6 months from now, if we've seen no change, I think we've got a lot of problems ahead of us, because we will need to start seeing some change. And I think it was during the finance section, it was Hege Erkland that say, if we haven't started to do things, we've got some real problems. But also, I think we're going to see a lot of the other innovation that's spreading out there. We touched on the issue of CO2 from other industries and the development of carbon capture as a solution. There's a very good chance that we're going to see a carbon CO2 supply chain evolving. That Heidelberg cement factory in Gotland in the Baltic Sea, they're going to reduce, I think it's something like 1.8 million tons of CO2 they're going to capture. Quite likely ship it round to this big Longships project up in the northern part of Norway. So there's a shipping chain that's starting to emerge there in a different way, but it's still part of shipping and this whole societal decarbonisation.
Okay, well, thank you, Craig. I think that's it for today. We would like to thank you, of course, and all of our partners and our main sponsors, who are PowerCell, Teco, and Hexagon Purus, and of course, all of our guests who have been here today, shared their thoughts and told us what they're doing right now. Okay, so thank you very much. See you back in January, and goodbye.
Tough enough to be on a spacecraft, light enough to be in vehicles. Some call us pioneers or enablers. Our composites technology is at the heart of what we do, and we do it with passion. Because we believe that clean air is a right, not a privilege.
The maritime industry is facing new challenges. The time to act is now. Hydrogen from renewable energy, combined with our fuel cells, will support you decarbonizing your vessels without compromising the performance. Our marine fuel cell system is developed to meet the highest marine safety standards. And most importantly, we can provide you with megawatt fuel cell solutions today. With us as a partner, your vessels will have high performance, efficiency, and safe operations, with true zero emission. It's time to move to a sustainable shipping. Join the next big wave today.